Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Fetter, and I am the curator of the Bright Lights film series that's hosted at Emerson College. Thank you all for joining us for a special discussion with Amy Seimetz, director of the new film She Dies Tomorrow, which is available right now on VOD. We're going to start off by talking about Barbara Loden's groundbreaking work of American independent cinema, Wanda, which is available to watch on the Criterion channel. Before we get started, I do want to mention this is a free event that's being hosted by the Coolidge Corner Theatre. The Coolidge is a nonprofit, and while the physical space is currently closed, you can help support them with donations, memberships, and more at coolidge.org. And I also want to let people know that they can chime in with their questions either using the YouTube live chat or by direct messaging the Coolidge on Instagram or Twitter. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's start with Wanda. It was made in 1970 and had a modest release, and then it was largely unavailable until the UCLA did their restoration in 2011. So I'm wondering, how did you see the film and what was your response when you saw it?
I saw it early on before 2011. There was a print going around New York City, I want to say, I think it was at Film Archives that I saw it. There was a print that was running around in the late aughts. Is that what we call it now? And so I saw it in New York with my friend Mary Bronstein, who is married to Ronnie Bronstein, but I know her as Mary Bronstein, or Mary Bronstein, because she and I made films together. But we went and saw it, and it was like amazing. She had seen it in college and told me I should watch it. This is like in my early mid-20s. Yeah.
And now I went to film school and I had never heard of this film. So what was your response when you saw it? You know, what did you think?
My first, the initial relief was I can make complicated female characters where I don't have to justify their existence, you know. That sounds really bleak, but truly, like I had a lot of films that I had seen where you would introduce a complicated female like a character, was that you had to have all these caveats of like, she's such a redeeming person and yada, yada, yada. Even though I'd watched many of my favorite films didn't have to do that with men, you know, that you could just like accept that he's just complicated and he's kind of nasty, you know, that it alleviated that pressure as a writer and a young filmmaker to have those caveats for a woman that I'm exploring, you know, that I could just like introduce a woman and here's how, like, she's just this person. And I don't have to say, but she's a good mom, or cause she quite off the bat, like displays, like she just doesn't care about being a good mom, you know, or being a good wife at all, or anything that we would say in society would be what you should be as a good person. You know, like that, it just like alleviated that pressure in exploring female characters for me, that it was its own existential crisis to just be sort of whatever you wanted to be as a woman, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a whole genre of the everyman film, you know, and I think when I was sort of reading about this, what I was struck by was Barbara's talking about, you know, this being just, you know, a person, you know, and that there's nothing sort of remarkable about this character necessarily, that, you know, she's just an average person. So what inspiration, so what was it about her directorial style, the visual style, her sort of portrayal of Wanda as a character?
There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, in addition to the landscape that she chooses too, I mean, half my family, my mother's family is from Western Pennsylvania. And so it's coal mining town, and there's coal miners, you know, like half of my family are coal miners. And sort of that landscape was appealing to me. and you know, becoming a filmmaker when I was younger, it was like, what's special about me or my family in our upbringing, you know, what's interesting. And it took a long time to realize, like, oh, what's special is your lower working class. That's like, that's special. Like, it's special and it's universal to storytelling, and not just that, just special in life, that you like that it gave voice to that sort of region. But in addition to that, my favorite part of the film that really like lands with me is that freeze frame at the end when she's just like so exhausted and she's drunk at the end of the bar, and the freeze frame when she's just like sort of out of it is it, you know, you look at that woman and you think, oh God, you feel so sorry for her. Or you feel like, oh no, what's happening next? But it's such a common sort of image that we see out in the world that you do question, like, what brought you to this point where you're sitting there, but also the danger of the of that, you know, of getting to that point, you know, which I feel like she saw, which is this struggle that brings you to that point where you can get so despondent and sort of like want to get out of your head and be so drunk out of your mind. Um, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy film to watch. I can see why a number of female critics had a really hard time with it, because you're watching this character that's just so powerless, you know, throughout the film. And it's sort of an interesting thing just to sit with and to you know, to notice your response to it, because it's not something we've really seen on film. Even, you know, I mean, it's still a rare thing to see a character that's just sort of, you know, that powerless, and it's, you know, and things are done to her rather than having her be, you know, an active participant in the story in some ways.
Interesting, because I would argue, I think there needs to become a conversation. Like, yes, there are definitely traumas that happen to her, right?
Hmm.
But I also find her powerful in so many ways. Um, in this way that like it's a conversation around victimhood that I think is a super delicate conversation, which is trauma that brought you to choices, and then trauma that continues to make you make, or like sort of like, not make you, um, thrust those choices forward, right? And a conversation that people don't really like to talk about. But at the same time, she is exploring that there's trauma in her past, and that but also that like the trauma is sort of propelling that character forward in her choices, right? Of
Mm.
going along with this man and staying with this man, and all of these things, and sort of trying to understand how history and trauma sort of shapes your choices, you know. So it does become a harder conversation of the trauma. Again, I'm not, it's not blaming victims, but in a way of describing the choices that trauma sort of present to you psychologically, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And there's it's very rich. There's so much that's sort of hinted at, and I think it was in the Karina Longworth podcast where she was talking about that moment where she's hit, you know, by the Mr. Dennis character, that you learn all you need to know by her response. This is not the first time this has happened. This is, you know, this is trauma that she's experienced before, and this is how she just continues moving through, right, doing what she needs to do. And so it's a very rich film in a lot of ways. I feel like it's, you know, I've now just seen it once, but I feel like I need to see it again to really get it at all of what's there about the character.
Right. And what's so I think accurate about it is the sweetness that she brings to it. You know, that she's not, you know, that she's so sweet and actually quite agreeable in a lot of ways, you know, which is sort of like the trauma, even in the court system, when her husband's like, she's a terrible mother, and she's like, yeah, I am, and just have the kids, you know, and that like her response is to be agreeable, which is something we haven't seen in this way. It sort of defies what we would think you would do if you're resisting sort of like abuse, you know. She's just like, she doesn't really have the wiring to know what to do other than survive and be agreeable, you know, in survival.
The word I was just thinking of was acquiesce, that she's sort of continually acquiescing, you know, that she's sort of giving in as survival, as, you know, the path of sort of least resistance, as a way to, I don't know, to find some sort of happiness, it feels like, you know, is to sort of be agreeable, acquiesce.
Right, in this way laid forward for her, which is she's smart enough to like know that she doesn't want something, which is to be a mom, which is not, you know, acceptable for the world, but she doesn't really quite know how to like find her path forward, and she finds herself trapped back into the same sort of system, because she's like trying to find freedom outside of that and finds herself with something worse, you know. And but to say that in a way, I feel like it sounds so dire. She has such a sense of humor about exploring that, you know, about, she just has like, she's very self-aware, or Barbara Loden, I should say, is very self-aware of the dark sense of humor of those traps, you know, of leaving one societal norm and then entering another that would be more nasty, but she's also finding her own freedom in that, but also being trapped in another form. And her sense of humor throughout that is like, I find is so magnificent, because it's just it's almost like a female absurdist comedy of like these traps that you find yourself in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to go to questions. I did want to, you know, bring up She Dies Tomorrow, but we have some questions specifically on Wanda, so I don't want to shift just yet. So Jason on Instagram asked, do you think Wanda would have seen a bigger release today?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's the kind of narrative that I don't think commercial cinema still is accepting of. It's the acts are hidden in a way that I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm very excited because Eliza Hittman's movie hit really well, and I hope it does really good with you know, sort of the more critical acclaim stuff of like these structures of what it feels like to be a woman. But I still don't know if people would readily respond to that exact structure, you know?
Mm. I mean, yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So I just wanted to remind folks that you can chime in with your questions using the YouTube live chat or by direct messaging the Coolidge on Instagram or Twitter. So I wanted to shift over to, oh wait, sorry, there's another question about Wanda, so I don't want to shift yet. So Emma on YouTube asked, did Wanda's use of the car, filming inside the car, inspire the way that you shot Sun Don't Shine?
Absolutely. Yes, that and Two Lane Blacktop. I mean, there was I mean, I really, you know, as a young filmmaker and or aspiring filmmaker, I was so inundated with masculine films, and I love masculine films. And so I love like Two Lane Blacktop, and I love Badlands, and I love like Michael Mann. I love all of these things. But to be introduced to Wanda and sort of that claustrophobic atmosphere that they have inside the car was so inspiring to me. But also it felt like whatever I was trying to get across is trapped in some sort of life moment for those two characters.
And then we have Bo Quintana on YouTube. I watched Wanda for the first time and was struck by how influential it was for later films starring complex women, in particular Vagabond and River of Grass. Are there any other movies that you would recommend that have similar themes, characters like Wanda?
I love that they mentioned my two other, Vagabond and River of Grass. I'm trying to think of what it would have inspired for other. I don't know. I mean, for me, I feel like the pressure cooker of Jean Dielman, the sort of repetitiveness of being a woman, that like pressure cooker of being, I think maybe like spurred some of this like aggravation as well, like predating some of these movies. Sorry, that's Chantal Akerman. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, the other movie that I really loved that has like an aggression behind it, and so many of her films do, is like Trouble Every Day by Claire Denis. You know, like there's a explosiveness to it that all of them have an explosiveness to it that are like very meditative and then explosive in this really beautiful way.
And so tell us a little bit about She Dies Tomorrow. It's possible that some of our audience haven't had a chance to see it yet, but sort of what was the inspiration for that film?
For me, it was my own anxiety and trying to words have boundaries for me, and I wanted to sort of, I guess, translate the feeling I was having and into sound and image and all of these things, in addition to not relating, but being a news junkie and watching the news cycle sort of every 2 days, get obsessed with something and then like move on to the next thing, and everyone go into a panic every day about like these things, which I'm not saying everyone as if I was like immune to it. I'm saying I was going into a panic every few days leading up to the 2016 election and then up until now. And watching how fear sort of spreads in these ways, and then like everyone moves on and da da da, but then also not being able to shake my own existential dread. So that was the feeling. I wanted to give the experience of what it felt like for my own my own anxiety, but mixed with like that feeling of like the days when you're like, oh, the world's coming into an end and you can't do anything about it, that wave of anxiety and sort of the like mundaneness after it comes down, sort of that arc of anxiety.
And now, of course, it's taken on a whole new resonance with the pandemic, with where we are, with the fact that we are all sort of caught in this anxiety loop to some extent. What's it like, sort of thinking about the film now, having it, sort of out into the world in the climate that we're in right now?
Well, I mean, it's strange. Obviously, it's surreal. I did not predict this. But, how everyone says the new normal, I don't know. I don't know how people would have viewed it if there wasn't the pandemic, because I don't have an opportunity to have people view it without the pandemic. I mean, we made it for 2 years before, and it was all about our own anxiety, not just mine, but like in a collective experience of everyone that made it, sharing their experience. It was all about everyone's anxiety. So it's surreal. I mean, every day we all say it's very surreal, but at the same time, life is so surreal right now that it sort of seems like the things that seem surreal, it's like it's on, like if you get a list of like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like at number 4, because everything else seems so much more surreal than like just having like my mother being a healthcare worker, and I'm wondering if she's okay. You know, I can't see these people, number 2, and 3, just like wearing a mask everywhere, you know. Number 4 is like, oh yeah, you made a movie, it's contagious. And then so it's not, it's, for me, it's not like it is surreal, but it's sort of number 4 on the list of survival and connection in a way.
And so what is it like sort of trying to get it to an audience now? I mean, it's not the usual channels.
I mean, I'm very lucky because Neon got behind it very early on. And so I, as opposed to a lot of people, but I will say that, but I also, you know, I could have taken the route of like waiting for another film festival to put it out, because I self-financed it, and it was a very small movie, and South by Southwest was supposed to happen, but I was just like, there's no film festivals happening. Like, one South by Southwest was canceled. Like, I, maybe call me nihilistic, but I was just like, no film festivals happening. And so I made sure that we could sell the movie, and Neon like sort of latched on I say that knowing how lucky that is, but so yeah, but I do know that there's a lot of filmmakers who are struggling to know what to do with their movie right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're festivals, but they're, you know, these sort of strange, you know, virtual, not, you know, not the sort of engagement that you want in terms of an audience in a space and watching it at the same time. And yeah, that's a kind of, I feel like that's something that everything's going to be switched around. You know, a film will get a release, and then these films will find their way back into the theater because audiences want to engage with them that way as well. So I'd be curious to see, when cinemas open back up again, how many of these films then sort of end up with some kind of theatrical release at a later date. Because I would love to see this film on a big, as a curator, I would love to see this film on a big screen now.
I would love to see you see it on a big screen, because I definitely sound designed it for that. But yeah, no, but at the same time, there's just like you know, we're engaging in so many things in a different way that, yes, like once we come back to cinema, I think it'll be like, you know, like when you really want water and you're like, oh, water is so great, you know, like you haven't had it for a while. But like, I definitely think we'll come back and to cinema, like wanting it more. It's just, how can we come back there safely, you know? But I definitely want people to see it cinematically, because I did design it for that experience, and then also the experience online or VOD. But it's just, but at the same time, I'm okay with people engaging with the content however they want to engage with it. It's not, I love that people are able to watch it that maybe wouldn't have gone to art house cinema in the way that they would have. I love the idea of engaging in it with like a drive-in theater. I love
drive-ins. I think that's been fantastic, the drive-in revival. I would love to see, you know, something other than Back to the Future or Jaws in the drive-in. I would love to see, you know, a film like yours in the drive-in.
Yeah, it has been up at a few places, but where are you?
I live in Providence, Rhode Island.
Clara will have to chime in at the end and tell you if it's around there. But yeah, there's this like lovely revival. I mean, even before my film opened at the drive-in here in LA, I went to see Relic and at the drive-in just because I wanted to be there. And it was packed. And it was a Thursday night and it was like packed and safely packed. Everyone's in their cars. But it was I had been to the same drive-in about 2 years ago and it was like completely empty same night. And so it's really exciting to see that people are engaging with the drive-in in this communal way, in a new old, retro way or whatever.
Excellent. Well, I know that we're sort of coming towards the end of our time. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about the film, about how, people, I mean, it's on VOD now, folks can and should see it.
I will say that everyone involved in making it are all my friends and everyone that I highly respect. And so it was such a love of mine to be able to work with everyone I loved and respected and be able to experiment and find something true, not just for myself, but like a collective truth through all the people I worked with.
Excellent. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you everyone who tuned in. Thank you for your questions. And this will live on the Coolidge Corners YouTube page. So see the film, revisit the conversation, and thank